Hi everyone! Let's go over the sentence structure used in IELTS Writing Task 1. Based on the band descriptor, a variety of sentence structure is important for IELTS to get awarded a band 9 for your grammatical range and accuracy. You need to demonstrate that you're able to use a wide range with full flexibility and accuracy. Remember, the more varied and the more accurate your sentences are, the higher the band score you get. In this lesson, we will review what are compound sentences, what are complex sentences, then check some sentence structures that we can use in reporting features of the graph, and lastly, we will discuss sentence structures used in incorporating data in your report. A compound sentence has more than one part that can stand alone, or independent clauses. Independent clauses are connected by coordinating conjunction, conjunctive adverbs, or a semicolon. Conjunctive adverbs: moreover, however, otherwise, therefore, meanwhile, accordingly, additionally, anyways, besides, certainly, comparatively, consequently, conversely, and elsewhere. We also have coordinating conjunctions: for, and, nor, but, or, so, and yet. How can we use it in writing a report? Let us check this pattern. Independent clause plus coordinating conjunction plus independent clause. Let us then go over this example. Evidently, the oldest age range reached a peak of almost 50% by 2010, but the middle-aged audience, 34 to 44, recorded just over 40%. In this given example, the oldest age is the subject, reached is the verb, and the peak of almost 50% by 2010 is the predicate. But is our coordinating conjunction here, then followed by the middle-aged audience, another subject of another independent clause, connected by our coordinating conjunction, then recorded as our verb, and just over 40% is another predicate. In the use of conjunctive adverb, let us check this pattern. Independent clause plus conjunctive adverb plus independent clause. The percentage of people aged 44 to 45 in the UK who went to the movie theater increased dramatically to over 50% in 2010. However, only 12% of the youngest age group attended the cinema. The percentage of people aged 44 to 45 in the UK is the first independent clause, followed by the conjunctive adverb, which is however, then another independent clause. Only 12% of the youngest age group attended the cinema. Conjunctive adverbs are sometimes called floating adverbs because they can be positioned at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of a clause. We have some examples. Bob is handsome. Moreover, he is rich. Bob is handsome. He is, moreover, rich. Bob is handsome. He is rich, moreover. In the first example, the conjunctive adverb is in the middle of the two independent clauses, while in the second one, it is found after the verb. And in the last example, it is in the end of the sentence. A note to remember: semicolon is used before conjunctive adverb and comma after conjunctive adverb. Semicolon can also be used if the relation between the ideas expressed in the main clause is very close and obvious. Without a conjunction, you can separate the clauses with a semicolon. Here is an example. Tom has benefited from his exercise program. He is slim and energetic. Notice that the semicolon is used after the first independent clause, followed by the next independent clause. Next, let us go over what are complex sentence structures. Complex sentence is an inseparable part of a well-structured report. It is used to make the essay more coherent and cohesive, and it is also used to expand on the main point. Complex sentences are two or more clauses joined together, but they are not joined by coordinating conjunction. Complex sentence is made by connecting an independent clause and one or more dependent clauses with a subordinating conjunction. Complex sentence contains language chunks, Let's start with subordinating conjunction. So here is a list for you to use in your report. You can pause this video to copy the subordinating conjunctions. This is an example of an independent clause. This sentence can stand on its own. We have to make sure it is blueberry. And for dependent clause, the purpose of this clause is to provide additional context to the independent clause. When we bake cake for his birthday, and because it is his favorite. This is how we can write complex sentences. When we bake cake for his birthday, we have to make sure it is blueberry. When we bake cake for his birthday, we have to make sure it is blueberry because it is his favorite. In the second example, we made use of because, which is a subordinating conjunction. Since you already know what complex sentences are, let us make use of them in our IELTS Writing Task 1 report. Let us start with the use of subordinate clauses. A subordinate clause is a clause that cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. It merely complements a sentence main clause, thereby adding to the whole unit of the meaning. Because a subordinate clause is dependent upon a main clause to be meaningful, it is also referred to as a dependent clause. Let us take a look at the first pattern. Subordinating conjunction plus SV plus SV. This is the first example, the use of while in task 1. While the figure for 44 to 55 age brackets stood the highest with approximately 37% in the initial period, 33 to 44 age groups rate listed the second highest, around 36%, having a minimal gap of roughly 1%. This is another example with the same pattern. After 10 years, although both age groups fell gradually, the former, just under 40%, was significantly higher than the latter, well under 40%. Now let us check an example in writing task 1. With a given line graph, here is an example of a comparison of data with the use of subordinating clause. While the figure for 44 to 55 age brackets stood the highest with just over 50% at the end of the period, 33 to 44 age groups rate listed the second highest, around 43%, having a minimal gap of roughly 8%. The sentence started with a subordinating conjunction while, and the subject 44 to 55 age brackets, followed by a verb, then the highest, and a comma plus an independent clause. In this sentence, we compare the data of 44 to 55 age group to that of 33 to 44 age group using the word while. Another pattern could be SV plus subordinating conjunction plus SV. Note that this time the subordinating conjunction is in the middle of the sentence. Let us check this example. The figure for 44 to 55 age brackets stood the highest with approximately 37% in the initial period, while 33 to 44 age groups rate listed the second highest, around 36%, having a minimal gap of roughly 1%. Note that this time the sentence started with a subject and a verb, plus a subordinating conjunction, then another subject and verb. Another example would be the use of whereas. Evidently, the oldest age range reached a peak of almost 51% by 2010, whereas the middle-aged audience, 33 to 44, recorded just over 40%. Let's take a look at this example. Here, we have our line graph and a sample sentence using this pattern. Going further into details, the rate of people who are 44 to 54 years old going to the cinema stood by far the highest with approximately 37% as compared to the youngest age bracket, 14 to 24 years old in the initial survey period, while the former only had a marginal gap of 1% more than 33 to 44 age groups data, about 36%. In the example, we compared several data from the line graph using the word while. Another way to ace in your report is to make use of relative clause in writing a report. A relative clause is one kind of dependent clause. It has a subject and verb, but cannot stand alone as a sentence. It is sometimes called an adjective clause because it functions like an adjective. It gives more information about the noun. So this is our pattern. S plus SV plus SV plus V. Or SV plus S plus SV plus V. Now let's check our graph again. Using relative clause, this is our example. Interestingly, the rating of young adults who are 24 to 34 years old, which ranked the third, was constantly 10 to 11% larger than the youngest group from 1990 to 2010. Adding the two relative clauses gave more details to the main sentence. Here are other examples. Meanwhile, the proportion of people in UK who are 14 to 24, which ranked the last, was constantly 10 to 11% lower than cinema attendances from 24 to 34 age group throughout the period. Interestingly, although the latter was higher than the former, the gap, which was around 14%, was similar in the last two given periods. Remember that with the use of relative clause, you are adding more detail to your main sentence, which make your sentence superior. The use of comma in clauses can also be used instead of using a subordinating conjunction to show comparison in your data. The pattern will be dependent clause plus comma plus independent clause. For example, in the given graph, hitting a low point at around 12%, the youngest remained the least among the other groups throughout the years. The first part of the sentence, hitting a low point at around 12%, is a dependent clause, and a comma, and then the youngest remained the least among the other groups throughout the years is the independent clause. Let's have some more examples. Meanwhile, despite a constant rise in the rate of 14 to 24 and 24 to 34 age ranges, the youngest remained the least among the others throughout the years, hitting a low point of about 12%. In this example, starting from despite a constant rise in the rate of 14 to 24 and 24 to 34 age ranges is a dependent clause, and the rest of the sentence is an independent clause. Another example following the same pattern could be, after 10 years, despite a sudden drop in the rate of all age groups going to the cinema, the percentage of the oldest age range ranked the highest with around 38%. Another way to show your wide range of sentence structures is to know where to put your figures in your report, and in changing your word form. We do not want to have the same structures. So, here, we included examples on how you can structure your sentence. Putting your figure at the end of the sentence and changing the word forms of your verb, adjective, and noun. For example, the number of cinema goers between ages 44 to 54 increased steadily, from about 37% to over 50% between 1990 and 2010. You can write it in three ways. First, between 1990 and 2010, the number of cinema goers between ages 44 to 54 increased steadily from about 37% to over 50%. There was a steady increase in the number of cinema goers from about 37% to over 50% between 1990 and 2010. Lastly, the number of cinema goers between ages 44 to 54 experienced a steady increase from about 37% to 50% between 1990 and 2010, a rise of about 15% in 20 years. Note that in the first sentence, the word increased is used as a verb, but in the second sentence, we use it as a noun. The word steady was used as an adverb, but in the second sentence, we use it as an adjective, so we put it before the noun increase. In the third sentence, we added the verb experience, then the adjective, and noun steady increase, plus the figures, then the year. Additionally, if you want to add figures in your report, this is the way to go. Put 2 or 3 figures together, then add the word respectively at the end of your sentence. Here are some examples. Meanwhile, there was a gradual growth in the rate of attendance of 34 to 44 and 44 to 54 age groups from 2005 to 2010, 41% to 43% and 47% to 51% respectively. The population of England, Northern Ireland, and Scotland are expected to grow by 5.9%, 4.2%, and 3.2% respectively. Figures can also be found at the beginning of the sentence. Let us study the given examples. The number of cinema goers between ages 44 to 54 increased steadily from about 37% to over 50% between 1990 and 2010. Can also be written in this way. About 37% to over 50% of moviegoers between ages 44 to 54 witnessed a steady increase between 1990 and 2010. In this sentence, we put the figures at the beginning of the sentence and change the verb to witness, then change the form of the word steadily to steady and increase to the noun increase. This sentence, the youngest remained the least among the others throughout the years, hitting a low point of about 12%. Can also be presented in this way. Hitting a low point of around 12%, the youngest remained the least among the other groups throughout the years. In your report, you have to code some data or examples, applying the following rules. Incorporating data using parentheses, adjective clause, and participial phrase will make your sentence stronger. Let us check this in detail. The use of parentheses. Example, in 1990, the rate of attendees between the age 44 and 54 was the highest, 37%. An adjective clause, which plus appropriate verb, is, makes up, constitutes. Example, in 1990, the rate of attendees between ages of 44 and 54 was the highest, which recorded 37%. In participial phrase, verb plus ing, making up, accounting for. Example, in 1990, the rate of attendees between the ages of 44 and 54 was the highest, accounting for 37%. Let us study the following examples. No data included. It is clear that 44 to 54 age groups by far had the highest percentage of cinema attendances. The figures for 34 to 44 years old was slightly lower than cinema goers aged 44 to 54. The figure for 44 to 54 was 3 times higher than 14 to 24 age groups. Data are incorporated. It is clear that the 44 to 54 age groups by far had the highest percentage of cinema attendances, 37% in 1990. The figures for 34 to 44 years old was slightly lower, accounting for 36%, than cinema goers aged 44 to 54, 37%. The figures for 44 to 54, which accounts for over 50%, was 3 times higher than the youngest age group in 2010. The first example made use of parentheses. The second example made use of participial phrase and parentheses. And the last one, we used an adjective clause. Well, this brings us to the end of our lesson. Remember, you need to practice and perfect your sentences in writing your report, which means you need to write without too many mistakes. The more mistakes you make, the lower your score will be. So, with the given patterns we discussed earlier, you can get a band 9 in your grammatical range and accuracy. Thank you.